Hello friends, Assalamu alaikum. So today we'll be discussing the Cripps Mission. You have to keep in mind that the Great Britain was still at war with the Axis powers during this time. That is, the Second World War was still going on. It had not ended. The Cripps Mission came in the year 1942 and the Second World War ended in the year 1945. So the Great Britain was still at war. Now, seeing the alarming state of affairs in India, because Pakistan resolution had been passed in 1940, and Congress was completely against the Muslim League, and Congress was asking for complete independence. But Congress was against any sort of partition, meaning they did not want a separate homeland for the Muslims to be created, which was the demand of the Muslims. So there was an internal rift within the subcontinent. So to ease all of that, they came up with a mission. And this mission was headed by Sir Stafford Cripps. He was a member of the cabinet. So he came into India in March 1942. Now, the reasons why he came in was to pacify, number one, to pacify the Indian population, and secondly, to gain support from the League and the Congress for the Second World War. This was because, both the League and the Congress had decided not to support Great Britain in this war because Great Britain had rejected their demands for complete independence. Moreover, they were anticipating that Great Britain, after the end of the Second World War, would go back on the promises that it was to make, in any way, because this was what had happened after the end of the First World War. The Cripps mission, when it came to India, it proposed a few things. What were the proposals? It proposed that after the war, an Indian Union would be set up, and that Indian Union would be given a dominion status. And in this dominion status, some individual provinces would be given a chance to opt out of the union and negotiate their own independence. This was the first point of the Krebs mission. Secondly, it also proposed that a constituent assembly would be established after the end of the war, and the purpose of the constituent assembly would be to frame a new constitution. In other words, it was stating that the Government of India Act would be scrapped off and a new constitution would come into being. Thirdly, elections for the Constituent Assembly would be held immediately after the end of the war. So these were the promises that the Krebs mission had come up with. However, Muslim League completely rejected it because it had no mention of Pakistan, and now they were talking about Pakistan, and they could settle with nothing less than Pakistan. Congress, on the other hand, also rejected it because it was asking for independence, complete independence with a united India, not an India which would be partitioned. So, this was what happened. And moreover, one more thing that you have to remember is Gandhi declared the Cripps mission as a post dated check on a failing bank. Here, post dated because the check was being submitted prior to its due date, meaning and the promises that the British government was making, they all had to be fulfilled after the war, and there was no guarantee whether the British would fulfill them or not. And on a failing bank referred to the Indian leaders who had exhausted all their efforts to come up with a compromise with the British. Living under the British, whether as a dominion status or as their colony, and therefore they no longer wanted any sort of a compromise with the British government. So with this we end. You get questions like what was the Krebs mission? If you get a question like that, so you can write all these points. Remember who came with the Krebs mission, who was the one who headed this mission, its date, the main points involved, and what was the purpose behind the Krebs mission. They wanted a compromise to be established with the League and the Congress. So with this I conclude. Hope this was helpful.